We have a peace deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan. Except we don't. Complete chaos in the Democratic Party. People are dropping out, endorsing. I'll tell you what all of that means. And my highlight reel from the main stage performance at CPAC heard around the world. All that's coming up right now on I'm Right. Well, here's where we are in Afghanistan, ladies and gentlemen. I don't have to break down the entire conflict for you. You know we went there in 2001, quickly wiped out a whole bunch of people, quickly couldn't figure out who exactly the enemy was. Since then, we've had a horrible strategy for about the last 19 years where we're helping this group, we're helping that group. We're trying to now train the Afghan security forces. They're betraying us at every turn. The Taliban remain the strongest force in the country and will take it back about 5.5 seconds after we walk out of the country. Yet every single general and State Department guy sits before the President of the United States and convinces him, I'm the one who can get us out of there. Don't worry, Mr. President. I have a plan. I have a plan. And the latest and greatest plan they've been working on is an actual peace deal or ceasefire of some kind with the Taliban. Here's Donald Trump on Saturday, before I go off on that.
I'll be meeting personally with Taliban leaders in the not too distant future. And we'll be very much hoping that they will be doing what they say they're going to be doing. They will be killing terrorists. I really believe the Taliban wants to do something to show that we're not all wasting time. If bad things happen, we'll go back.
If they wanted... You know what? Here's Mike Pompeo. I'm holding off for a moment. Here's Mike Pompeo.
We will closely watch the Taliban's compliance with their commitments and calibrate the pace of our withdrawal to their actions. This is how we will ensure that Afghanistan never again serves as a base for international terrorists.
Let me explain something right now. Any peace deal that requires the Taliban to do anything is one that's going to keep us in Afghanistan forever. If your plan to leave Afghanistan involves the Taliban doing some sort of a ceasefire or some sort of a de-escalation of violence, then we're never going to leave. The Taliban are not one monolithic group. There are 8 million different tribes. Even if you made a deal and you happen to get one tribe who won't screw you over the first chance they get, the next tribe is just going to come in and do it. Oh, did I mention? That was over the weekend when we kind of had this peace deal. As of this morning, the Taliban announced they've ended the peace deal and they just, I believe it was a truck bomb, blew a bunch of people up in Afghanistan. And the reason I'm so upset about this is not just the loss of life in Afghanistan. I'm upset about this and that why are we not figuring this out? We have to leave if that's the goal. I want us out. Maybe some people disagree, that's fine. But if you want to leave, there's not an easy and clean way to do it. And the reason I get frustrated is that means we're going to be there forever if you're waiting for an easy and clean way to do it. The Taliban is not like we're negotiating with France. It's not like you're negotiating with some reasonable nation state. They're a bunch of radical Islamist tribal people. They're barbarians. They treat women and kids like garbage. They blow themselves up and other people. They hide and train terrorists. They hide in caves. They're monsters. I realize that. And I realize that nobody wants to look at all the blood and treasure we've lost in Afghanistan and say, well, we just got to go. But ladies and gentlemen, if you want out of Afghanistan, there's nothing else you can do except for land a big C-130, load all the troops and equipment on the back of it, and fly out and say sayonara on the way out the door. A Afghan peace deal that involves the Taliban doing something is a guarantee to stay in Afghanistan forever. I don't care about the president's nice words about the Taliban or any of that. None of that stuff matters to me. What matters to me is finally bringing our men and women home from that hole where we have no mission, which is unfair to our troops. And as of right now, there's not even a plan to do so. You can say, well, we're trying. Well, I mean, we're going to do this. How long do you have to try? Load them up and fly them home. John Bolton, of course, King Neocon, took to Twitter, because that's where all foreign policy stuff is discussed now, and said, quote, Signing this agreement with the Taliban is an unacceptable risk to America's civilian population. This is an Obama-style deal. Legitimizing Taliban sends the wrong signal to ISIS, Al-Qaeda terrorists, and to America's enemies in general. This is, of course, one of our established foreign policy people who clearly has no idea what he's talking about. No person in their right mind think the Taliban have any designs on the civilian population of the United States of America. If you want to make some argument that the Taliban are these barbaric, anti-women, anti-freedom monsters and we should stay over there and fight them, I disagree, but that's fine. If you want to make the argument that the Taliban have designs to come to our shores and kill Americans, you're a moron. Sorry, that's just a fact. So what am I supposed to do with all this, ladies and gentlemen? You know how big of a fan of the presidency I've been so far, the jobs, the judges. I believe he has the right heart when it comes to foreign policy. He's constantly out there saying, bring us home. Yes, I believe he's getting extremely bad advice on Afghanistan, but here's the thing, people, and I know this is going to make a lot of you uncomfortable. He's the commander-in-chief. The buck stops with him. So if we're making crappy peace deals with the Taliban that are going to doom us to stay in that place throughout the Trump presidency, that's on Donald Trump. Donald Trump very likely has 5 more years in office. When he walks out that White House at the end of that 5 years, if we're still in Afghanistan, I'm sorry, I don't want to hear about the advisors. I don't want to hear about the generals. I don't want to hear about this Pentagon guy or what that senator said. You are the commander-in-chief of the United States military. Bring us home if you want to come home. And if you don't want to come home, step up to the microphone and say you don't want to come home. But stop telling me you want to come home and then bank on peace deals with the freaking Taliban. Might as well make a peace deal with a rabid Wolverine. All right, we got Jim Hansen, former Green Beret, to talk about that and other things coming up in just a second. All of that may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right. Joining me now, former Green Beret and president of the Security Studies Group, Jim Hansen. Jim, I actually think you and I are probably going to disagree on this, which is why I wanted to have you on today. Afghanistan. As soon as I saw that there was some peace deal with the Taliban, I rolled my eyes. And not because I don't think the intentions are good, but if getting out of Afghanistan requires a peace deal with the Taliban, then we're never getting out of Afghanistan. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, because the peace deal doesn't matter. We're getting out of Afghanistan. That's the point. President Trump said we're doing it. It's the right thing to do. And the Taliban, to be perfectly frank, don't matter. All right? They're there. We're here. They're not going to hurt us here. Therefore, we don't care. Now, we have to have a peace deal, give it some air quotes there, for political reasons. We don't expect these barbaric scumbags to abide by it, but we have to pretend that we're doing this in an orderly, nation-state style fashion. So we're playing the game.
What if, and this is actually exactly where I am, what if I have no faith whatsoever that we're actually going to leave? And this is why. It's not that I don't think, I know that President Trump wants us gone. He's been emphatic about that. People tell me behind the scenes he really wants out. But we're going to start pulling out, and as we start pulling out, the Taliban are going to do what they do and start mass slaughter of women and kids, let alone what they're going to do to the people who've allied with us over there. And our media, because they're disgusting, they're going to finally discover Afghanistan exists again, and they're going to broadcast every one of these deaths to the world to make Trump look bad, and the American people are going to freak. Am I wrong?
No, you're still right, and we're still going to do it. All right, because if we do this right, we can make the agreements, we can start the negotiating about prisoner swaps and all the things everybody's whining about right now. And that will drag us through the election. And guess what? After the election and Trump's second inauguration, he'll have a lot more flexibility to deal with stuff like this. And even though those horrible things are going to happen, and even though that's horrible and all decent people abhor horrible things, we're not responsible for everything bad in the world. We're not the world's police force. We're not a lot of things. We're not the world's domestic violence shelter. okay? We can't keep everybody safe, and we can't keep our troops in Afghanistan forever just because no one can figure out a way to get out of there. That's not going to turn it over to the Taliban and the rest of those guys. We let them have it, and then we deal with them by saying, if you do anything stupid there, we have a lot of Moabs and Tomahawks that we're not using right now.
Do we have to further change the military brass leadership? And I'm asking this because I'm worried about, another 4 or 5 star general walking into Trump's office and convincing him that he can just give him another 10,000 troops in another 5 years and he'll get the job done, because that's what we've had for 19 freaking years, Jim.
Yeah, I know, but only 3 of those were Trump's, and he is sick of it. All right, he doesn't kid around. That's the difference between him and a lot of other politicians, is when he's made his mind up, you may change it once, you may give him that pitch and say all those things, but at this point, he's already decided that the strategic calculation is get out, and he's right. Now the political calculation is what they're trying to use to push him into staying, as you mentioned. The media will, turn it into the biggest story of the world for a few weeks. And there are going to be the people at the DOD who do not want to lose this war. It doesn't matter. We didn't win it. Consequently, we're not going to stay there forever. Trump's not going to let them. And I think all the bad things that are going to happen are worth it if it points out to the world that we're not going to make stupid decisions just because people want us to.
What happens there when we are gone, Jim? Explain to people a little bit of the inner workings of that country, because people genuinely don't understand. It's such a foreign place from ours. What happens? Last American troop, Lord willing, gets on a C-130 and he's gone. What happens?
Well, there will be bases there that have our not quite troop-type troops, the JSOC pipe hitter types. We'll stay there because occasionally we're going to have to kill bad guys. So we'll have a presence there. It will not be conventional. It will be covert and special ops. Then the Afghan government, which is weak, is going to negotiate with the Taliban. And eventually between those two, they'll either come to a power sharing agreement or the Taliban may even take them over and win the government. Still not a good enough reason for us to occupy and garrison that place forever, because we can't ever get all those people on the same sheet of music. I mean, if you look at it, Alexander the Great, the Soviet Union, the British Empire, everyone who's gone there has turned into a graveyard of their empire. We're getting out before that. Consequently, it's the right move to do. So let them have their tribal squabbles. Let them do it. If they start supporting terrorism and allowing Al-Qaeda and guys like that to operate, then we bring the scunion back to them. Absent that, not our problem.
Jim, look, you have to understand something. Most of my audience is not like you and wake up and drink Cobra blood and stuff like that for breakfast and sleep in the mud at night. What is JSOC to the average everyday viewer? Could you please explain yourself?
Dude, you've been to my house. If we got Cobra blood, I missed it. But JSOC is the Joint Special Operations Command. It's where the Navy SEALs and Rangers and Special Forces guys go when they don't want to have to do the normal things and they want to basically just be involved on the dark side. That's our guys who go in the dark of night and make really, really bad things happen for bad people all around the world.
That's a beautiful thing.
beautiful
Jim Hansen, Security Studies Group. I'll see you again soon, my friend.
You got it, Jesse.
All right. We have more things. Well, we have more things from me. And now coming up next, we have complete chaos in the Democratic primary now. People are dropping, endorsing. I'll tell you why all that's happening. Why? Because I'm so smart. Hang on. Tomorrow is Super Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you unaware, which everybody watching my show is probably aware, a bunch of states are going to have their Democratic primary tomorrow, and we are going to have a lot more clarification on who the nominee might be in the Democratic field. Well, that situation just got a little bit more confusing in the last 24 hours because Pete Buttigieg has stepped out. Amy Klobuchar has stepped out. Tom Steyer has stepped out, and this is where we stand with them. Klobuchar, we already know. It's basically been the worst-kept secret in the world. She's going to endorse Joe Biden tonight at Joe Biden's rally in Dallas. Rumor has it, and I have this as a pretty strong rumor, Pete Buttigieg already has a private plane to take him from South Bend to Dallas, probably to do the exact same thing and endorse Joe Biden. By the way, you have to love these fossil fuel people always hopping on private planes. You couldn't make a phone call and save that carbon footprint, but that's another story entirely. Either way, here's Mayor Pete.
And so we must recognize that at this point in the race, the best way to keep faith with those goals and ideals is to step aside and help bring our party and our country together. So tonight, I am making the difficult decision to suspend my campaign for the presidency. I will no longer seek to be the 2020 Democratic nominee for president, but I will do everything in my power to ensure that we have a new Democratic president come January.
If you buy that, ladies and gentlemen, then I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona I'd love to sell you. Politicians are all completely self-serving. They're all obsessed with themselves. They're all narcissists who think that they should be in charge of absolutely everything. If you think for 1 second Pete Buttigieg is dropping out of this race, just, out of the goodness of his heart, just so we can all come together. Ladies and gentlemen, he cut a deal. Or he wants to cut a deal, and he's trying to curry favor with somebody. Pete Buttigieg is, I believe, 38 years old. He was trying to leap from being the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, a place none of you, or at least most of you, will ever go in your life. He was trying to jump from being mayor of South Bend to being president of the United States of America, and therefore the most powerful person in the world. Do you think somebody with that kind of ambition just, golly gee Whittakers, I just want to do what's right for everybody and the Democratic Party. You think he actually did that out of some benevolence? Oh, gosh, people. Pete Buttigieg struck a deal or is trying to strike a deal with somebody. Trump, I'll explain what he's doing here in a second. Trump took to Twitter and said this: Pete Buttigieg is out. All of his Super Tuesday votes will go to sleepy Joe Biden. Great timing. This is the real beginning of the Dems taking Bernie out of play. No nomination again. And here's what Donald Trump is doing. You've seen this as kind of a consistent theme. He's not going to stop doing this. He's always needling the Democratic Party, acting like they're going to screw Bernie Sanders over. Why? Well, they are going to screw Bernie Sanders over, or at least they're going to try. That's one. Two, the likely scenario now is that none of the Democrat candidates have enough delegates to have the nomination, to have secured the nomination by the time they get to their convention. Now, it doesn't even matter if Bernie's not leading. If we go into the convention and there's no nominee, and Bernie comes out of that convention and he's not the nominee, Bernie Sanders supporters are going to say he got screwed, and after they screwed him last time, they are going to lose their minds. So what you see Donald Trump doing, it's strategic. He's trying to make sure he's poking the Bernie Sanders supporters in the ribs and making sure they're already frothing at the mouth in order to get ready to scream from the rooftops that Bernie Sanders has been screwed at his convention. Look, they're Bernie Sanders supporters. They tend to be on the younger side. They tend to be a little bit more violent than the average Politico. They tend to be a little crazier. They're not going to take anything but a Bernie Sanders nomination laying down. And the more dissension there is amongst the Democrats, the better that is for Donald Trump's reelection campaign, because he knows at this point the likely scenario is Biden or Bloomberg come out of that convention as the nominee, and Bernie Sanders people flat out cross party lines to vote for Trump just to screw whoever the Democratic nominee is, because you can't hose people over and over again. Now, we would be remiss if we did not pay proper homage, whatever, I went to community college, to Amy Klobuchar and her comedic wit.
The president actually sent out a tweet. He made fun of me for talking about climate change in the middle of a blizzard, and he called me Snow Woman. So I wrote back, hey, Donald Trump, the science is on my side, and I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard. So I wrote back, hey, Donald Trump, the science is on my side, and I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard. So I wrote back, Donald Trump, the science is on my side, And I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard. Sometimes, if you haven't noticed, you use a little humor. Like when he called me Snow Woman at my announcement in the middle of that thing, I wrote back on Twitter, I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard. So I wrote back, hey, Donald Trump. So I wrote back, hey, Donald Trump. So I wrote back. I tweeted back. The science is on my side. And I'd like to see how your hair would fare. And I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard. I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard. Mr. Umbrella. Mr. Umbrella Man. Mr.
Oh, that's really well done. All right. All right. We've got more show. Hey. Coronavirus update. I'm going to keep this brief, but we're always going to try to keep you updated on where exactly we are. And here's where we are. No, it's not time to panic. Why? Because there's never a time to panic. In the history of mankind, no story has ever gone, this bad thing was happening, and then this person panicked, and it all worked out because of the panic. Panic causes death and destruction. Don't ever do that. You want to stock up on some water and dry goods? Probably not the end of the world. But it has come to our shores. We now have multiple people dead in Washington. We have a lot more than that dead in Italy. So that's now modern industrialized countries that are losing lives over it. Apparently the thing spreads like wildfire. Now, all that is sad. Keep them in your prayers. Make sure you're washing your hands. That's not a joke, by the way. You can make fun of people to say that, but apparently it's extremely effective. And you know what? You should probably wash your hands a lot even when there's not a deadly plague running around, but be that as it may. Every once in a while, I like to get, a little nostalgic about the way America used to be. No, we've never been this one gigantic unified nation where everybody got along. That's a pipe dream. Don't listen to that. But throughout our history as a country, there have been times where something terrible happens here, happens to us. And everybody, Republicans, Democrats, everybody, they all come together. They all join together. And I miss that. Ladies and gentlemen, what if 9/11 happened today? You remember 9/11? We all remember. Towers fell down, and everybody, even if it was just for a day or two, everybody came together. Now we have a pandemic, and Democrats have made it an anti-Trump thing. Ladies and gentlemen, when there's a deadly plague wiping out lives across the globe, it's not about President Trump. Everything isn't about the president. Everything isn't about landing political shots. Listen to Nancy Pelosi here.
With Ebola, we did $5 billion. Now they're trying to take the Ebola money and spend it here. So what he's doing is too late, anemic. Hopefully we can make up for the loss of time, but it'll have to have the professionals in place, the resources that are adequate, and not be using scare tactics about people coming back to our country.
That's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. That's the last thing the American people need to see. And no, I don't expect Democrats to stop politicizing things. I don't expect Republicans to stop politicizing things. It's politics. It's a contact sport. I don't whine about that. But when it comes to something that doesn't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, and it could kill you either way, don't the American people need even a brief dose of the American president standing shoulder to shoulder with the Speaker of the House, both of them saying, we're working together on this. No, we're not friends, but on this, we're working together to make sure you're taken care of. Don't you think that would be a better route? How can these children not see that that's what the American people need to hear at this point in time? Trump has no time for what their Democrat media alliance is doing with it. Here he is.
I'm just saying we should all be working together. She's trying to create a panic, and there's no reason to panic because we have done so good. These professionals behind me and over here and over there and back here and in some conference rooms. I just left a group of 45 people that are the most talented people in the world. Parts of the world are asking us in a very nice way, can they partake and help them? So Nancy Pelosi should, and she knows it's not true. She knows all they're trying to do is get a political advantage. This isn't about political advantage. We're all trying to do the right thing. They shouldn't be saying, this is terrible. President Trump isn't asking for enough money. How stupid a thing to say. If they want to give us more money, that's okay. We'll take more money. Some Republicans think we should have more money, too. That's okay. We'll take more money. But they shouldn't demean the people that are on the stage who are the finest in the world. They're not demeaning me. They're demeaning the greatest healthcare professionals in the world.
All of it for political points. And look, I know I'm jaded, I'm cynical, I have no heart and soul. You all know that. You've watched the show long enough. But call me crazy. I wish during moments like this, everybody could set everything aside, even if it's just for a moment, and stand up on stage together and say, you know what, we got this. And I think it would be remarkable how effective that would be on the American people. But what faith do you have now, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, looking at these two, looking at Nancy Pelosi, throwing mud at Trump, throwing mud at the professionals he's put in there? What faith do you have that she has your best interests at heart? That she's out there working as hard as she can to try to make sure this crisis doesn't get worse? And she is an extremely powerful person, mind you. Third in line for the presidency, that's the Speaker of the House. Come on, do better. Be better. All right, we got a lot more show for you. Hang on. Joining me now, he's become one of my favorite political analysts out there because the guy is sharp as can be. Ken LaCourte of LaCourte News. Ken, welcome to the show on a Monday. We've got just a couple things going on out here.
Great being here. But before we get going, I was in an audience last week at CPAC with thousands and thousands of people, and there was one good-looking guy up there doing a fake news broadcast. Sound familiar? You brought that place.
It does sound familiar.
It was outstanding. The social news network, SNN, should become a real thing.
You know what? We might just make that a real thing in the future. I'm glad you enjoyed, man. I had fun doing it out there.
Look, you know what? One of the biggest problems that conservatives have is they're usually not funny. And it's nice to have a handful of guys out there that know how to tell a joke.
Well, look, it's not the only way I'm able to be funny is because I don't have any soul or morals or anything like that, and that stuff only gets in the way of comedy.
Always
now,
help.
To the race.
Yes.
Explain to me what's happening today, Ken. We have Buttigieg out. We have Klobuchar out. We have Tom Steyer out. We know Klobuchar has already basically made it public. She's going to endorse Biden tonight. Rumors are now swirling that Pete Buttigieg is getting on a private plane as we speak to go endorse Biden tonight. Why?
Well, look, I mean, the Democratic Party is freaking out right now. And the Democratic Party, of course, isn't one person or even a small group of people, but there's very many important people. Those are rich people. Those are politically connected people. And they see the polls, and the polls show that tomorrow Bernie's going to have a great day. And so I think that they put all of the pressure that they can, saying, you know, you want a future in this party, you should probably be one of the ones that doesn't help the Democratic Socialist, which I still haven't figured out the difference between that and a communist, to help him become elected. Because if he gets elected, I think they're fearful that they lose the House, they lose in a landslide. I mean, that's a reasonable thing for them to fear. So I think that there was enormous pressure from donors and everything else out there to come together and help out Biden, or at least somebody be the alternative. Question is it too little, too late? You know, not a whole lot of people are sitting out the night before the election trying to figure out what their vote's going to be. Would have been, if one of them would have been smart, they would have done it in that last debate to say, you know what, he's bad and it sounds self-serving. I'm dropping out right at this minute. Just please don't vote for Bernie Sanders and help the Democratic Party take back the country from Trump. That person would have been a star. That person would have been a top tier nominee in 4 years. But they got pressured out at the last minute.
See, this is why we have Ken LaCourte on, people, because it never even occurred to me, and that would have been the ultimate mic drop moment. It would have been.
Could you
here's
imagine?
my ultimate
And then you
question,
turn off on
Ken.
your heel, say, God bless America, you walk off the stage.
Oh, it would have been legendary. It would have gone down in political history. I love that. But my question is, why Biden and not Bloomberg? And this is the reason I say that. I realize Biden just had a great showing in South Carolina, and I realize he's got the resume. He was the presumptive frontrunner when he jumped in. But Bloomberg, not Biden, is the one who has built up favor after favor after favor with the Democratic Party at every level across this nation. I thought that he would call in those debts. Hey, I elected all these mayors, congresspeople, senators. You know, there are delegates beholden to him. He can't seem to buy any Democratic support from major figures. Why?
You know, look, it's like Draco Malfoy coming onto the Quidditch team because his dad bought everybody a broom, right? I mean, you're a presidential candidate. You've been working your brains out for a year, 2 years. You've been slugging it out. You've been going into these diners that you don't even like and dealing with people being rude to you so that you could be a nominee. The concept of having some guy just swoop in who's only there because he's rich. You know, if I'm any one of those candidates, I'm like, come on, give me a break. I'm not going with that. I'm going with Biden, at least who he was slogging through the snow with him in New Hampshire.
How much do these endorsements, we know Klobuchar is going to endorse, or at least we think we do. The rumor is that Pete is, assuming they both do. How much do endorsements actually matter? I've never put much stock into them myself, unless you're a fresh candidate and they give you a little bit of legitimacy out there. Do voters really, you know, if you're a Pete Buttigieg voter and you find out, whoa, he's endorsing Joe, I guess that's where I'll go. Does that actually happen?
I think you're exactly right. If nobody had ever heard of this one person, an endorsement really helps. And it's like, oh, I'd never heard of that guy, and maybe he's good if they like that. But by and large, voters are often underinformed, but I've been on a whole lot of focus group with voters over the course of my previous and past careers, and they're generally pretty smart. They say, okay, I know that there are deals being made and what's going on. They're still going to vote for who they think is the smart one. That probably affects them very minorly. What is the more effect of, okay, the voters who are leaving a Klobuchar? Now, let's be honest, that was 6% or 3%. That's not a huge amount of people, but who are those people like? You know, if you were going to vote for a Klobuchar, you're probably not going to turn around and vote for a Bernie Sanders. I mean, the only one who would help Sanders probably by dropping off is Elizabeth Warren, just because their philosophies overlap so much.
Speaking of endorsements, Obama again came out and made a public statement that he has no intention of endorsing anybody at this time. All I have are rumors. All I have is whispers. What happened with Biden and Obama? I mean, Biden was his dude, vice president for 8 years. I'm not saying they were best buddies, but vice president for 8 years, and Obama won't step up for him. Why?
Yeah, but being vice president isn't like being the guy's consigliere, okay? When, the Kennedys hated Johnson. I mean, a lot of presidents and vice presidents, they picked them out of expediency. You know, Biden wasn't picked because he was Obama's best buddy. He was picked because they're like, look, we need kind of an old, stable hand, moderate white guy on the ticket to make me look more palatable in my first campaign. So I don't think that they were particularly close. And again, it wasn't like a buddy film there. You know, one thing that all politicians have in common is that the most important thing to them is their own politicians and their own reputation and whatnot. Would you have wanted to put a whole lot of money on Joe Biden up until maybe today? I mean, look, he won his first primary on Saturday after running for president 3 times. And he was always kind of a major player, never won a single primary. So if you're Biden, you're not going to be like, okay, I've got this one huge endorsement, I'm going to put it on Sleepy Joe. That was a risk. Wouldn't be crazy for him to do that right now. But, then Bernie pulls it off, and guess who's not, guess who's trashed around there. So, it's for an Obama, that's a big give, and it's understandable, I think, that he's holding off on that.
Who comes out of this thing, Ken? I mean, are we still heading to a brokered convention? About 24 hours ago, I would have told you it's basically a guarantee we're heading to a brokered convention. Now, I don't know. What's going to happen?
I think in 30 hours, we'll have a lot better idea. A lot of these states, I was reading up on California, they're not going to know who got how many delegates by the end of tomorrow. It's another one of these. They've changed systems. They got new voting things, new voting booths. I don't know if they'll be as bad as some of our earlier primaries. My gut right now tells me this is still Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's probably got a 60-70% chance of winning that. I don't think he needs to go into the convention with an absolute majority, but if he has a pretty strong plurality, I think they know if they rip that away from him and are seen by all of his supporters as stealing the nomination 2 years in a row. Because last year, that wasn't just political pressure last year. Last year was a theft. I mean, literally, by any definition of the words, Hillary Clinton bought off the Democratic establishment and the DNC with cold, hard cash, and probably illegally. And if that happens again, I think they say, wow, we just, how many young kids, of the stoners who are a big chunk of his support are going to then get up and go vote for a Bloomberg or a Biden? They're going to take a powder if he loses. So I still think it's his to lose. I think a broker convention, I'm not a big believer that they pull out somebody who didn't run for office or whatnot. It would be very difficult and unpopular for them to pick out somebody other than the number 2 or number 3, and whether that's Bloomberg because he bought his way in, or Biden just by the process of attrition. And Biden is still doing very well among African Americans. I mean, look, he had a solid victory on Saturday, bigger than I thought he would, bigger than the polling showed, because blacks like him, and they're not sold on Bernie.
Ken LaCourte News, I appreciate you, my man. Thanks for making us smarter again.
Great being here. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
All right, that's Socialist News Network bit he's talking about from CPAC. We're going to play it for you today. Hang on. Well, if there's anything I love, it's me. And I spoke at CPAC this weekend, that gigantic political conference. And of course, they needed all the most powerful, important, handsomest people in the country there. So they invited me to go up on the main stage and do a bit of a parody skit because, let's be honest, who would be better at that than myself? So without further ado, enjoy my Socialist News Network bit from CPAC over the weekend. Hello, and welcome to the Socialist News Network. I'm Jesse Kelly. My preferred pronouns are they, them, her, him, and it. While 150 million Americans have lost their health insurance after Congress passed the president's Medicare for All bill, Democrats are confident the plan will end in huge savings after all those people finally die. Adam Schiff was confirmed to the Supreme Court today. Earlier, an exuberant Schiff took to the microphone to express his great appreciation.
Some of my colleagues made the statement repeatedly that I've met with the whistleblower, that I know who the whistleblower is. It was false the first time they said it. It was false the second through 40th time they said it. It will be false the last time they say it.
In other news, the whistleblower has announced that Schiff will be the best man at his wedding, godfather of his child, assuming he's able to locate a woman desperate enough to procreate with him. Schiff is the 27th confirmed member of the Supreme Court. The body is expected to vote later today to officially change the name of the Politburo. The president formally announced Columbus Day will be eliminated and changed to Elizabeth Warren Day. Apparently, some people were confusing it with Thanksgiving, so let's get something clear right now. You eat a turkey on Thanksgiving. On Elizabeth Warren Day, you sound like one. Celebrations on Capitol Hill today as Greta Thunberg was named the next EPA administrator. At her acceptance speech, Thunberg treated the crowd to some of her signature warmth and charm.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
In further efforts to combat climate change, airline flights to Hawaii have been permanently banned for everyone except for Democrat candidates for president who are flying there to talk about the dangers of fossil fuels. In a related climate story, the president signed an executive order mandating that all the electricity in Washington, D.C. come from wind power. Critics of the order are already complaining about the rolling blackouts every time Eric Swalwell leaves town.
Chris, so far, the evidence is uncontradicted that the president used taxpayer dollars to ask the Ukrainians to help him cheat an election. Cheat an election. Cheat an election.
10-year-olds have finally been granted the right to vote. Joe Biden was asked what he thought about more kids being involved in politics. His only answer was, police are confirming their search and seizure of all guns from homes. Coincidentally, we're seeing a massive rise in violent crime, which Democratic politicians are calling a win, as it means America is finally becoming more welcoming of MS-13. The numbers are in, and the population of the United States skyrocketed to 7.7 billion after all the borders were formally abolished. That sent the unemployment rate to 96.7%, but who needs a job when cocaine prices are this low? In other news, Nancy Pelosi took to the podium to accept an award last night.
Imagine the honor to get the NAACP centennial anniversary. And now it is a great pleasure to be with you here in New York, in Detroit. For 100, and once we restore the vote, once we break the grasp of special interest, to do so you must avoid the dazzling, blindness.
It's nice to see Pelosi back out there after a brief embarrassing moment last week when she tried to use a wine bottle as the gavel. Finally, saying goodbye to bathrooms. The last men's and women's room closed today. The rooms, synonymous with gender discrimination, were useful to people who had to relieve themselves for decades. When asked what the people should do now, the president urged Americans to follow San Francisco's lead and find an open slice of sidewalk. What can I say? All right, we're going to be back to do this again tomorrow on a Super Tuesday. It's going to be a wild day. Don't miss it. I'll give you all my thoughts on that. See you then.